What's up, everybody? It's Val from Reverse OCV. Today we're going to go over the As Val versus the MP5 and why you might want to use one over the other so we can figure out what is the best close to mid-range weapon to use in Warzone. We're only going to compare the base guns, the common builds, or my current setups for each gun. Everything's going to be broken down into categories and tallied up at the end. Before we get started, here are my current versions of the guns. With that, let's get into the video. The first category we're going to get into is the recoil. Starting off with the MP5, the MP5 has somewhat of a normal recoil pattern in the sense that it goes up and to the right. It does have some horizontal recoil, but overall this is manageable as we all know, especially in closer ranges. Now the As Val on the other hand has a weird recoil pattern in that it goes up and to the left, then comes back and goes up and to the right. It also kicks really high. Even in closer ranges, you're going to have to compensate more for the recoil on the As Val. And this definitely hurts it when you're shooting at range. With all this considered, I think the MP5 wins this category. For our next category, we're going to go over the damage and range of each gun. We're going to focus on about 0 to 30 meters, so then we can cover both close and mid-range. From here, you can see that the As Val kills a lot faster in this range. The MP5 is still really good up until about 10 meters, but not as good as the As Val. Then the MP5 gets drastically worse in the time to kill department. At all of the meaningful ranges that you would use this gun, the As Val definitely wins here. Even if you have to shoot it a little further out, the As Val still wins. So the As Val dominates the damage category. On to the movement speed category. Movement speed is a defining thing for SMGs, and you're going to want that ability to move around quickly in Warzone. Going by just the base stats, the As Val has a movement speed of 4.69 miles per second, while the MP5 has 4.85 miles per second. But that's just the base stats. Unfortunately though, the As Val only has one attachment that can boost your movement speed, and it comes at the cost of your bullet velocity and recoil, which is never good. To make matters worse, with that barrel attachment, you don't even reach the base MP5 movement speed. Meanwhile, the MP5 is usually used with the collapsible stock, which will blow the As Val out of the water. So clearly, the MP5 wins this category. For this next category, we're going to combine the ADS speed and all of the sprint to fire stats. Starting out with ADS speed. We know that having a good ADS speed is one of the most important stats for all guns, especially with close range guns. If you want to go try to clear out a building, you're going to need all of the speed that you can get. So let's get into the stats. The base As Val has an ADS speed of 225 milliseconds, and the MP5 has 200 milliseconds. Going by those stats, you would think that the MP5 would win with attachments free. But using my main builds for the guns, the As Val actually comes in at 210 milliseconds. And the MP5 is at 216 milliseconds. But this is going to be heavily dependent on how you build your MP5 and As Val. Because of that, we can say this can go in either direction, but the MP5 does have a higher potential for better ADS. Since this category has multiple parts, I'm just going to count this as a tie for now. So on to the second part of the category, the sprint to fire times. If you plan on playing fast, you're going to need a good sprint to fire time so you don't get caught off guard and can get the kill as quickly as possible. The base As Val has a sprint to fire time of 263 milliseconds, which is pretty much the typical AR sprint to fire time. Unfortunately, the same thing can be said about the tactical sprint to fire time. Both are normal AR times, which means it cannot compete with SMGs. So when you put all these things together, the MP5 wins this category pretty easily. So let's get into the final category, which is the reload time and mag size. If you're playing squads in Warzone, you want to have a fast reload and a high mag size so you can take out multiple people in a row, and generally sleight of hand hurts you. That slide is usually used for better options, but it's not always a waste. Generally for Warzone though, the mag size is preferred over the faster reload time. Just look at when the PKM was popular. Anyway, the As Val has a 20 size mag by default and 2.18 seconds for reload time. The reload speed is good, but generally everyone's going to use a mag attachment anyway. And this is when one of the problems come in. With the mag attachment, you can only get 30 bullets. That is not good for Warzone, especially if you're playing in squads. For solos it's fine, and for duos you might be able to get by too, but definitely not squads. Meanwhile, the MP5 has a 2.79 reload time and a base mag size of 30, which can be boosted up to 45 bullets. Yes, the MP5 does have a slower reload time, and some people do use sleight of hand to help it out, but overall the MP5 wins in this category. Before we get to the final score, I want to do an extra category for special or miscellaneous things. In this case, it's going to be for hipfire, because it plays such a big role in some people's close range game. Hipfire comes into play very often in close range, and a lot of people build their SMGs for it. So I felt this had to be taken into account in some way. Even though the As Val is a SMG assault rifle hybrid, it takes more features from the assault rifle side, so unfortunately it has assault rifle hipfire. That means it will never be able to compete with an SMG. Both the MP5 and the As Val can use the 5mW laser, so it doesn't even get an advantage in that sense. Putting a 5mW laser on the As Val generally just doesn't help as much as putting it on an SMG, so the MP5 wins the special category. Now that we finish all the categories, let's tally up the points. The recoil category goes to the MP5. The damage category goes to the As Val. The movement speed category goes to the MP5. The ADS and sprint to fire category goes to the MP5. The reload and mag size category goes to the MP5. And finally, the extra category goes to the MP5. So clearly the MP5 wins on paper, but that's not to say the As Val is a bad choice at all. Everyone has things that they weigh higher than others. I personally weigh the damage category really high, which makes this look closer to me than the stats show. Because at the end of the day, you want to kill people faster, and the As Val will let you do that. As long as you're hitting your shots, most of the time the As Val will have enough bullets to kill a couple people. Although you can avoid this by using the MP5 since it's more forgiving overall. If the As Val had better movement speed, this would probably be my go-to close range weapon. The faster movement speed from actual SMGs is just too helpful when moving around the map in Warzone. The As Val is still a good middle ground between SMGs and ARs, although it definitely leans heavily on the AR side. The problem is it doesn't gain the main traits that define SMGs, which really hurts it. You also have the problem of having to manage your ammo better. Moral of the story is, the MP5 is the best weapon to use for close to mid range. If all you care about is damage, go with the As Val. If you want the best option overall, use the MP5. Let me know what you think of these categories in the comments below. If you like this video, hit the thumbs up and subscribe for more content like this. See you all next time.